checkerboard spiral. It stretches into the distance below, persisting at the edges of my sight and into the endless unseen. The image is mirrored as I look above. I ascend slowly, then quickly, then backwards, feeling the space surrounding me. Am I really ascending? Am I moving? Do my eyes and mind fail and deceive me as I lay rotating in space, creating the illusion of physical displacement? I float in assimilation, directionless, formless, boundless. Was I going anywhere? The lead up to this situation had been seemingly so slow and grueling, but what happened next was so quick that I only understood it when it was already over. The stall door swung open, but with only about half the strength as the others. It was opened with a conviction and predetermined belief that there was nothing here. It gingerly rotated the last 15 degrees, gradually and finally tapped me on my left knee. Currently, I had halfway mounted myself onto the grab bar in a pose that was likely practiced in either yoga classes or described in a modernized Kama Sutra. I had, in the last moment, removed my dominant leg from the toilet's lid and put all my faith into the sturdiness of the wall-mounted bar. The cop spun on his heel just before seeing me. He hadn't suspected anything. My ruse worked. The stall was officially empty. "No one, nothing, nada," sounded off the cowboy in a squeezed baritone, characteristic of someone short and stocky. He was the bad cop, the one who believed himself just slightly above the law. Bad enough to flaunt it at a 16-year-old caught possessing a few grams of weed, but not bad enough to actually ever truly step out of bounds. I knew his type. Even though I was not a cop, he would brag about his petty exploits at bars, recreate his interviews, and portray his suspects as the basest, weakest simpletons. His foes were small-time villains who had no chance against him but would fight on anyways, just for the sport of the story. Ultimately, though, they were always outdone and outsmarted by him. Well, and by his partner. He was there too. "Sir, we have a lot of work to do today. Step out, we'll have a word, and you can be on your way," said the other cop. The official nature of the statement betrayed an insincerity, but there was something else. I could sense the subtle new tinge in his official voice. A transformation from an emotionless guardian of the law to a bloodhound who had picked up the trail. The tall black cop was the brains of the operation, the quiet one who always put down the final puzzle piece. He wasn't necessarily the good cop, but the gravitas with which he carried himself allowed him to build much more rapport with suspects than Cowboy ever could. By his mannerisms, I knew he probably had scored top marks both in high school and the police academy. He was a success story, and everyone in his family was proud of him, even his twice-removed aunt and thrice-removed cousins. This guy was high grade. The person inside the stall had not made any reads on either of the cops. He didn't realize the severity of his situation. He was still focused on his anal explosion. "I can't, well..." But now it finally started dawning on him, the gravity of the situation, and he decided that he had crapped enough for a chat.
"But if I need to go back in, I'm going back in, okay? Just let me clean up."
His voice was a bit strange. He would pitch his tone up as he ended his sentences in a way that even statements would sound like questions. I was roughly familiar with his type. He worked at a coffee shop or a fast food restaurant and called it adulting. He likely collected various things which his parents would find uncharacteristically immature for his age, plastic baubles of his movie heroes or some such. He didn't play with these baubles the way a child would. Rather, he would recite some clever line from that character's collection of utterances at the plastic. Then again, perhaps my analysis was off. A 12-year-old would do that too, just not as well. It was hard to say if his diet had much to do with his current gastrointestinal predicament, but it probably didn't help either. He tried to eat healthy, but just only. High grade was waiting for him. I couldn't see the scene myself, but the bathroom had an echo to it that allowed me to hear many minor details of their interaction. I could imagine the rest. Cowboy wasn't staying in place. He was half-circling, staying at a range at which he wasn't threatening, but which could make the coffee kid feel flanked and exposed. Meanwhile, High Grade was facing him directly, his body canted slightly back on his heels as he stood relaxed with his feet slightly apart. His hands were hanging loose, but probably languidly crossed in front of him just so that he wouldn't appear too large and threatening. He just wanted to talk, but he didn't start, he waited. The subtle, combined hostility didn't even take 5 seconds to push Coffee Kid to open up with a,
Is this about the vending machine?
Cowboy sighed slightly, probably rolled his eyes. His partner and him exchanged a tangible glance. It was a knowing glance, but they did it so overtly that even this dunce would catch it. He had made the wrong move, and had to make up for it. He might be making up for it for a long time. He tried.
I am sorry, but it ain't my money. I work a minimum wage job and it was literally just stuck on the very last prong. The very last one. So I reached in, but I paid for it.
His voice cracked at the end there. He was leaving something out. The lapse of weakness made the air become slightly more palpable and heavy. I could hear a little bit of static from one of the cops' radios. High Grade replied with something back in the coded language police would speak in, but I could tell that it was a everything is good sort of message. Meanwhile, I took the pause to put my feet back on the lid. My door had rebounded off my knee enough to close once more, and I didn't want to be in the crouching tiger monkey pose for the whole duration of this interrogation. I heard someone open the bathroom door, but Cowboy immediately confronted him. Sir, either wait for 5 minutes to use the bathroom downstairs. It's directly below this one. All of this commotion had seemingly given Coffee Kid a little bit of breathing room. Cowboy wasn't going to let up, though. He came back strong. He lectured him like a teacher addressing a mediocre student. Now listen, you. But then High Grade took point on the questioning. Actually, we're investigating something else. An assault on a homeless man? A pause. He was reading the initial reaction. Then he would click his pen. Would you please recall where you were around at noon Friday? Before Coffee Kid could even answer, Cowboy interjected. You were on Monroe Street, weren't you? It was a mild question, but the forwardness knocked Coffee Kid back. He replied with an uncertain,
Well, yeah,
Cowboy wasn't going to let up. He wasn't overt about his frustration, but there was a sense that he thought all this extra crap that High Grade had made him go through was silly. He already knew that they got the right guy, he just had to let his partner go through the motions. 3430 Monroe, the gas station. You were there on Friday at 12 o'clock. 12:14 if we were to be more precise. The distance between them was closing, but very gradually. Cowboy had spat all this data out with enough force that a bit of spittle might have landed on the coffee boy.
Well, what? I mean, that's right before when my shit was going to start. I work at the bagel shop just down the street from there. But no, I wasn't there. Not on Friday. I went to the Mexican place. You know, the small one with the salsa.
He was about to culturally enrich them about the local cuisine, but High Grade decided to interject. Sir, you drive a gray sedan? He didn't say it in an accusatory tone, and Coffee Boy seemed to only be afraid of Cowboy, so he answered with a simple, sincere,
Yeah.
Cowboy stepped back, gave him some breathing space. Another pause. It lasted a while. High Grade was deciding. It wasn't enough. Surprisingly, it was Cowboy who noticed something. He was excited. I heard him approach once more. Why's your hand in your pocket? He moved even closer. Let me see your paw, boy. That last bit came out with a bit of a twang on the O. It was more of a boy than a boy. He usually didn't let it out, but right now he was done with the charades. The officers would confirm that his hand was in fact busted, badly. I couldn't believe it. The Coffee Kid had also smashed his right hand. Funnily enough, if you took a look at mine, you would hardly even be able to tell that I had punched anyone. It felt bruised up, but the damage had in fact been quite superficial, and today you'd have to look very closely to notice that I had sent someone into a coma. This was the crescendo, the big reveal. It all fit so well. The police officers were now completely convinced of his guilt. Heck, at that moment even I was convinced of it. However, they did not immediately arrest him, but I knew they would, soon.
I can explain.
Famous last words. I knew what was going to happen. They would let him keep talking. He would get a few things wrong and contradict himself somewhere. They would have him repeat it all at the station, and then High Grade or someone like him would use these failings to make him look even more guilty. They would beat him over the head with all of it until even he would be unsure of whether or not he had done it. This kid wouldn't be able to fight it the way I could. I could hire a lawyer competent enough to prove the truth, that I had been the one attacked. Despite the adrenaline boost from the chase, I was still in a somewhat penitent mood from my pilgrimage to the broken man. I could feel my own presence in this room. Until now, I had just been an entity listening in on an investigation, but now I knew I was there. Yet somehow this all still felt unrelated to my previous experience of the day. even if I bore the blame. I felt myself snap out of it. I had been all inside of myself from being so scrunched up. My limbs relaxed and the mood passed over. I already knew I had gotten away with it. I just had to wait for the mechanics to work themselves out, and then I was free to go. This situation was only possible due to the shortcomings of other individuals. The police needed a quick resolution. This wasn't a particularly dangerous town, and so they were used to their winning streak. Had they ever lost, really lost? Had any of their comrades been shot on the job, killed on the job? No, probably not. Even though one of the cops was quite sharp, this confident psychosis had lulled him into keeping his analytics narrow and focused, without any breadth or creativity. He didn't consider it necessary. The officers had not been thorough. Their scene of investigation was, in fact, extremely small, with exactly one plausible hiding spot, the very spot they had not checked. The coffee guy, I could analyze him in depth and figure out where in the interrogation he had gone wrong. It had certainly been early, but it was probably even earlier than that. Things had been going wrong before this point, perhaps not even completely by his own fault. Not overtly, not obviously, not in a way he would notice, but subtly. To the coffee kid, it would all appear as a long streak of bad luck. He'd always been slightly late, slightly too brash, slightly too impatient, slightly too agreeable, slightly unprepared, and slightly too much like the kind of guy who would commit this kind of crime. An up-talking loser. He was a puzzle piece that fit this story far better than I ever could. Didn't take much imagination to see how this kind of guy could get into a fight with an ornery raccoon hobo. Perhaps the only perplexing part about all this was the result of the fight, not the fact of it. The legal system probably wouldn't even contemplate his motives for too long. It was hardly a topic worth spending much time on. But the witnesses, they couldn't possibly back me up on this arrest. This guy would be arrested for all of 5 minutes. They'd show him to the kid from the gas station, and he would simply tell them that they got the wrong guy. What then? It's as I was thinking about this that Cowboy's voice started knocking on my brain case, rattling me out of the half-dream of deep thought. Enough. We have a witness who saw you run past him, and you enter this bathroom. High-grade shifted gears, now verbally moving in lockstep with his partner. There's no one else here, and what you have told us doesn't convince me. Click. He was done. Sir, turn around. You're under arrest for the assault and battery of James Robert Stone. Those words bounced around in my head. I had committed yet another crime by coming here. I had incriminated someone else for my crime, knowingly. They probably could even prove it when they figured out that they had the wrong fellow. It was laughably simple. They would check the cameras of the hospital. There were plenty. They would figure out that I had done the stupid and demented. I'd come to visit my victim. In court, this would be used against me to paint me as a silent threat to society, lurking at the peripheries, wearing the cloak of decency. I might be even worse, someone apathetic to human suffering, but who had a basic curiosity of it, evil in a very ancient, vapid way, the blackness of a sky that never cared, the animal that disposes of its weak offspring to allow the others a chance. Click and click. They got him. He was so weak that he couldn't even put up a decent verbal fight.
God, I am going to miss my shift, and then Mr. Pickle will surely fire me.
Mr. Pickle. Of course he worked for Mr. Pickle. This guy was a Mr. Pickle. Would they really figure it out? These guys had small-town badass syndrome, and this was cinematic. They'd caught the suspect by beautiful circumstance. When you looked at it objectively, they had hardly any evidence on me. They didn't know what I looked like besides the fact that I am white and average. They didn't actually know what exactly happened, and they had unreliable witnesses. The cops knew where I was, when I was there, and the color of my sedan. That's it. Even my hand would not rise against me. It wasn't bruised enough to clearly be the veteran of a recent scuffle. By the sound of it, Pickle's hand would fit the crime scene much better, even though his bruise was merely, by his account, from his girlfriend shutting the car door on it. I couldn't figure out the calculus of the situation. It had either gone totally in my favor or totally against me, but either way I was at a periphery. If I confess now, I might be saving someone a lot of heartache and perhaps even their livelihood and freedom. The cops thought they were protecting the innocent, and I was mocking that notion. Protect the innocent.
I should give myself up now. If I waited this out, I would be racking up another charge. If I revealed myself now, the situation wouldn't be used against me. To the contrary, it might work in my favor. I could already picture the narrative. I had been afraid to take responsibility. But upon realizing that my actions had consequences far beyond my tiny personal world, I had decided to man up and take it. I could see my sharp-witted lawyer speaking of my virtues to overpower myself to do that, probing at the jury with the notion that anyone would be scared of a crime this spontaneously serious. But me, I had the balls, the rectitude to do what was right even when I was about to get away with it. It almost brought a tear to my eye. They let him out, and everything was forgotten. What happened next happened in a haze of consciousness. I was guided by the instinct of a caged animal, one who had spotted an opening. My legs had cramped up from being in a strange position for so long, but that didn't hinder me, not in the least. Escape was near. If I got away, they would never figure it out. Pickle was just a distraction.
I didn't need to do anything for him that he hadn't already done for himself. I needed to escape. I pushed the door just slightly ajar and looked out. Clear. Get the hell out. No, not through the hallways. I could be spotted by them and the kid. The elevator. Perfect. It was actually waiting for me. I could hardly believe it. The door to salvation was literally just 3 steps away. I lunged out. I kept it civil, but my motions were still of someone possessed. I had moved so gracefully that I knew that no one had taken note. Where to now? 1. No one would be at 1. No one would even expect me to be at 1.